Have you ever heard of the Bear River Massacre? Or have you ever wondered how restoring the land can help heal not only ecosystems, but also cultural heritage? These are big questions, and there are some big answers coming up in today's episode. Hey everybody, I'm Stephen Schauer, and welcome to Stories Sustain Us, where we are exploring the inspiring journeys of people dedicated to making the world a better place. Today we're joined by Brad Parry, Vice Chairman of the Northwestern Band of the Shoshone Nation and a leader in environmental restoration. In our conversation, Brad shares about why the restoration of the Bear River Massacre site in Utah is both an environmental and cultural mission for the Shoshone Tribe. Now, you may not have heard of the Bear River Massacre as it hasn't quite gained the notoriety of, say, the Battle of Little Bighorn or the Wounded Knee Massacre. So it might surprise you then to learn that historians consider the Bear River Massacre to be one of the worst, if not the absolute worst, massacre of Native Americans in the West. For the Shoshone, the tragedy of that day continues to reverberate throughout their history to this present moment. In this episode, you'll learn about the Bear River Massacre and the incredible work the Shoshone Nation is doing to restore the land at that site as a way of commemorating their history and the lives lost on that cold winter day in January 1863. From removing invasive species to planting native vegetation, the Shoshone's ecosystem restoration work is about more than just the land. It's about ensuring future generations understand and honor their history. Let me tell you a bit more about Brad before getting into this amazing conversation. Brad Parry grew up in Syracuse, Utah, near the Great Salt Lake. His biracial upbringing and deep connection to Native American heritage shaped his perspectives from an early age. Brad's path to conservation began with a student internship that led to a nearly two-decade career at the Bureau of Reclamation, where he worked on water management and habitat mitigation in the Colorado River Basin. Over the years, he's witnessed firsthand the power of collaboration, whether it's working with farmers to improve water quality or leading his tribe's efforts to reclaim ancestral lands. Today, as a natural resources officer for his tribe, Brad manages the Wuda Agua Restoration Project, leading efforts to restore and protect Shoshone lands. Now, join us as we dive into this powerful discussion on environmental restoration, cultural preservation, and the importance of community engagement, right here on Story Sustain Us, where we are inspiring action through the power of storytelling. Well, good morning, Brad. Thank you for joining me on Story Sustain Us. How are you doing today?
How are you doing, Steven?
I am doing very well. I'm so excited to speak with you. I came across an article that you were in about the project that you're working on the Bear River, and I've been really eager to learn about what you're doing and learn about the history of the area and the history of the tribe. So thank you very much for taking time to join me on the show this morning.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity.
Fantastic. Well, before we get into the restoration work that you're leading up, let's get into your life. Let's dive into your story. So, tell me a little bit about you, Brad. Where'd you grow up, and what's your personal story?
Yeah, so I grew up in what's kind of northern Utah in a little town called Syracuse. It's not so little anymore. When I grew up there, it was farms and wetlands and things like that.
Yeah.
So and it was right on the banks of the Great Salt Lake.
Okay.
Which will play into my things later in life, the work that I do.
Yeah.
And, we got our first stoplight when I was in high school. And so, just kind of had that small town experience with friends and family. I'm from a biracial family. My father's Native American. My mother's, Danish.
Okay.
And so, I just figured everybody had that in their life, when I was younger, and realized that no, it wasn't. So,
yeah.
From a very early age, my grandmother, May Timothy Parry, always told me, you're an Indian boy, you're a little Indian boy, like that's who you need to be. And always explained that to me. And I grew up next door to my Uncle Bruce, who was the Indian Affairs Director for the state of Utah for a time in the 70s and early 80s. And so, just in Native American culture, tribal culture, whatever, was always around me. My dad and them were always working on something like that. So
Yeah.
kind of really who I was early on, and just kind of carried that with me. And getting into high school, you just do things, and I played a lot of sports, and during a baseball game for the region title, the team we were playing, we both got in a really big scuffle on the field, and I got called out like in the newspaper, and then the next morning my dad says, your grandmother wants to see you.
Yeah.
And went over there, and she just very gently is like, we don't do that. We don't do this. We don't do that. We don't do this. This is who you are and what your name is. And I mean, you hear that from your grandmother. You're like, time machine. You're like, oh, if I had a time machine, that'd be the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah, yeah. Carry some weight.
Yeah, and so like I went to, we had a football conditioning class very first period, and football coach was obviously there at the game and pulled me aside and was like, hey, and I just said, you know what? If you're gonna yell at me, you please wait till after school. And he says, give me a good reason why. And I said, well, I just met with my grandmother, so I'm on the verge of tears. And he goes, you're Native American grandma? I go, yeah. And he goes, no, we're fine.
Yeah.
We're done.
Yeah.
So she had it, and she still does. She still kind of has that sort of respect for her name, for who she just is. And she was trying to teach me to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And so that's how I always was. And so,
may I ask a question about that? Yeah. Is there a component not only for respecting the family name and the family heritage? Is there also a component of a bigger spotlight, maybe on you because of your Native American history? Is that part of her reasoning that, hey, not only do we need to have a respectable name, but, if we do something minor, somebody might make it a big deal because of the racism issues and the other, is that part of what plays into it?
It is. It is.
I'm sorry for that, but
she had told me when she was in school at Washakie, what she had to endure with the teacher that was there. This wasn't a boarding school. This was just a day school.
Yeah.
Cut their hair, spoke English.
Yeah.
He would hit the kids with rulers and paddles, and
jeez.
She said she refused to tell a story. The guy was collecting stories and from the kids, and she just said, well, I'm not going to do it. And he just kind of told her, you're never going to be nothing but an Indian in the dirt.
Yeah.
And she wanted to avoid that with me. Like, hey,
yeah, sure.
This is what I went through.
Yeah.
To make sure people look at us good, you need to do the same thing. And it was a cool lesson, because it wasn't, it wasn't like she came in and screamed. She's just like, we don't do this. And
sure.
Here's why. And she just reminded me who I was. And so since then, I've really tried to just be like, okay, I don't want to bring a bad light to the Native American name,
right?
The Northwestern Shoshone name, or all encompassing. You just want to be that, so you don't get Native American Brad Parry did.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's the headline you dread.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sorry that's the world we're living in, and that you and your family grew up in. But thank you for explaining that, and I appreciate you letting me ask that question, because I understand it's brings up some vulnerability, I imagine, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, it was cool. Like, I ended up going to the University of Utah, getting a bachelor's degree, and
right on.
And you're in school, you don't know what you're going to do after.
Yeah.
And the Bureau of Reclamation, whose federal office was fairly close to the school, had a day, and my dad had worked there, and I just went up, and I didn't know the recruiters, but I'm like, hey, what is this? They're like, we pay you $10 an hour, and we help you pay for school. And I'm like, oh, I don't care what I do,
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand everything that you guys do. I know you do water, but, and so I applied, and me and 2 other students were hired for the student intern program. And when I finished school, I was offered a full-time job. And I worked there for almost 19 years.
Yeah. Wow.
And so half of that time I was kind of the lead, or, just the coordinator under my boss for the Colorado River Basin Salinity Control Program, which is a huge program.
Yeah.
Formation. And so I got to see farms from Farson, Wyoming, down to, Farmington, New Mexico, over into Arizona and California. Just all 8 Colorado River Basin states, and managing against salinity and removing invasive species. And so
yeah.
The engineers there and the biologists were, really great to me. Like, they took the time to teach me, hey, this is why we do this is why we do this, because I was the program guy. I wasn't an engineer, wasn't, water guy or anything like that. But, for 10 years, they guided me along. And we were fairly successful in those programs. And I loved doing the work. We did, part of our stuff is we had to do habitat mitigation. Anytime you do construction on that sort of federal project, you do mitigation.
Yeah.
And you help people plan, and you want them to do bigger projects, because it'll make more. If 30 people do their own tiny project, we say, no, just dedicate a piece, and all of you.
Yeah.
And our goal was to reduce the salinity in the water. But when you do that and putting things in pipe, you also lose less water. So, you gain more water.
Yeah.
And those are just, things that I learned and did that for a long time. And then, I joined the tribal council in 2017. And by 2019, we had already purchased the land. I had already helped, things like, you guys need to understand what these water rights are. Because we had some folks that are like, oh, some of the neighbors want this water right and this water right. We should be good neighbors. I was like, no. You don't give away what they're never making more of. And, so let me bring in a guy, that I used to work with. And he came in and he valued it, and it, everybody's eyeballs pop. Oh, I didn't, you don't realize.
Yeah.
And those so
water rights are special.
Yeah, so from then on, they're like, well, what else can we do up there with that water? And I was like, well, I'd have to leave my reclamation job to come here. And they're like, well, would you? And I'm like, for the family, yeah,
Yeah.
And so that's how I got to that point,
Yeah.
And all my experiences, when I was younger, just, my dad always, we were always Indian together, my uncle. My mom supported it heavily. Yeah. My grandmother.
Did you have siblings and growth?
I had an older sister.
Yeah.
I had an older sister. She's wasn't as active in that sort of a community as she is now. And I played a lot of sports growing up. Loved going fishing. Loved going deer hunting.
Yeah.
Not really just to shoot a deer, but to be at the old Indian camp with my great uncles and my dad and cousins that I don't see a lot, and just hear all the stories about World War II and about Indian experiences growing up on Washakie, and you hear those stories and you're like, okay, it really shapes kind of your life.
Sure.
So I always just thought, well, I'll stay that way, and I didn't. The other day I was wondering, was I like that? Did I really talk about that stuff when I was a kid? And out of the blue, an old high school friend just had messaged me and said, hey, I just got this job with the Shoshone Bannock. He said, just to let you know, I dropped your name and said how you talked about it. He says, I'm grateful you talked about it, a lot when we were in junior high and high school. And I was like, he's like, I hope you're okay with that. I'm like, yeah, I'm okay with that. I said, you just reinforced it. Oh yeah, I still was that.
Yeah, right on.
So so that's my main focus for the last decade is just tribal relations and trying to do things like that.
Can I dig a little bit deeper into your BLM work before we transition
You
into
are.
kind of the 2017 forward? But I'm curious on the work that you were doing throughout the Colorado River Basin. I'm assuming I just want to make sure I understand it. I'm assuming you were working with landowners and farmers and ranchers on how to manage their land better to stop runoff and better manage that runoff, how to restore riparian corridors, and is that kind of the work that you were doing, or was it something different, or that and something else?
Uh, no, it was basically that.
Yeah,
So the Bureau of Reclamation had a special authority for underwater quality to treat salinity in these areas because the Colorado River Basin is just a collapsed salt dome.
yeah,
And as the salt moves down the river, picks it up, by the time it gets to a certain point, those folks can't use it.
sure,
And so, a lot of studies, and they'd had this program for a long time. But yeah, a lot of people were just still irrigating with open earthen canal and
mm,
flood irrigating and
mm,
those sorts of things. And we're like, they would run out of water, their crops wouldn't be very, very good. And so what we did was just like, you guys need to pipe from the river to your farmsteads, and then each of you need to upgrade your farm system with like side rolls, center pivots,
yeah,
gated pipes, something that will, temper and get better coverage and better water management. So we did have a lot of that. We worked a lot with the U.S. Department of Agriculture as
sure,
well because they do all the on-farm
that
work,
makes
and we
sense.
do all
Yeah,
the off-farm. And for every area, we mostly worked with companies, so you get 100 farmers in one company. You'd calculate all the salt that was in their soil, however those guys did it, and you'd rank them. They'd put in a project, and you'd say, well, who gives us our best ton per salt,
sure,
cost? And then yeah, we would go there. They'd get an education on learning how to use the side rolls, center pivots, how to, how long to irrigate and things like that. And then we would go out and, hey, you guys have to do X amount of numbers of mitigation. And at first we saw these little farms just doing it one piece at a time, and they just weren't
yeah,
working. And so we just started to suggest just set aside 6% of the overall project funding, set aside a piece of land that y'all can help take care of and do a bigger project, and you'll get more bang for your buck.
yeah.
And they
And the
did.
environment
So
will get a bigger bang for the buck.
yeah, and they
Right.
really started doing that, and they're like, oh yeah, this was a lot easier than me
Yeah.
having to plant my 100 trees.
Yeah.
And so we really kind of took that on, was like, okay, we're gonna just say in the announcement, you have to get together and find this, because yeah, it was just so much better. And people were, when they were done, like, they used to complain a lot about having to do it, but after it was done, they were, oh man, this is great. There's so many birds and deer, and
Right. Right.
it's beautiful. And it's like, well, yeah, that's what you do. And so that was my job, was to like oversee the contract, the agreement, work with the farmer, work with, our engineers at Reclamation, and, liaison with the Department of Agriculture, just to make sure these projects would get put in correctly, and, and yeah, just create that habitat resource at the end.
Yeah. So I'm assuming over a 19-year career at the agency, working throughout the Colorado Basin, you saw firsthand, the effects of climate change and the
Oh yeah.
impacts of the Colorado River dwindling from what it once was to kind of what it is today, and the challenge it's faced, and those who need it. Right. I mean, it's a giant river basin that impacts farmers in urban areas and everything in between. So I imagine you know exactly that this is happening. This
But,
snowpack's not happening, and the water's not flowing as it used to. And so what's your thoughts on all that?
yeah, I mean, we would talk, I mean, before it became a real topic in the news, like, we would talk about it in our meetings with farmers and, advocates and stuff, guys that really knew their land and water stuff. It's like, hey, this stuff's running out. We're going to have an issue with this if we don't remove these invasive, if we don't start planting native. We're going to have a real air quality problem. easier to set on fire.
Yeah.
And they're like, we're losing water and our water's dirty. And so they were like talking, but no one was really listening. Like, hey, we need more funding to do these things. We're like, well, does it help create help? Yeah, it kind of does. I said, but really what it helps create water. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I was like, well, we'll lose less water if we do this.
Right. And removing the non-natives is what I think you're referencing, right?
Russian olive and yeah, removing the
yeah. Just so the audience who may not understand that technical,
sorry,
just want to make sure people understand what you're referencing. That if you're removing non-natives that are sucking water, they're heavy water users, you might actually save water.
Yeah, like Russian olive. Like a Russian olive tree is like the worst thing in the world for me. Because we're constantly removing them. And it's all, it's just from here down. So it's not just our Bear River system. It's Colorado. It's all those river systems. All those farmers, all those people fight it. Just a quick training on that. The tree takes 75 gallons of water a day out of the system. That's what it brings in and holds. And it doesn't release oxygen. And so it's like, okay, I'm losing a lot of water and I can't grow crop here because it just like ruins the dirt.
Yeah.
So when you cut it, we stump cut it, and within 15 minutes we paint on an herbicide. Yeah. If we were to miss that 15 to 30 minute window, we have to recut the stump because that's how fast that tree regenerates.
It'll just grow again, yeah. Yeah.
And so, it's not like it's dead when you cut it. And so that's why they're extremely invasive. If you go and pull them out by the root, they come back even stronger because they drop all their seeds.
And the soil's disrupted, and that just is fertile ground to grow in. So
and so that's why when I say invasive, like they're just a major water suck. And
yeah. Thanks for explaining that.
Yeah, it's hard to convince people. It's like, well, your guys' job is to take salt, like, yeah, but this will help. And, our thing was, hey, the solution to pollution is dilution. The more water we get in there, the less this. Yep. And it just, it didn't start hitting home. And then when I left reclamation and came to work for the tribe, then people started looking at, oh my goodness, we need to plant trees. And I was like, yeah, those smart guys that I used to work for, they kind of saw the writing on the wall. And,
I appreciate the
catch up.
Yeah, and appreciate you and folks like you and the folks you worked with helping to educate folks, because it is. I've had some experience with that in my career working on restoration projects and helping people understand, the removal of non-natives and the, what natives, how they are just different. They're made for this environment, and their root systems are deeper, and they don't need as much water because they can survive droughts better, and just making sure people understand some of these complicated concepts if you're not raised in it or educated in it. So folks like you helping people get that is important work. So thank you for all those years of service. Appreciate it. Yeah. So we're into 2017 now, and that's when you took on the position with the Northwest Band of the Shoshone Nation. So you're currently in a vice president position, is that correct? And
I'm currently in the vice chair spot.
Yeah, thank you.
In the tribal council. So we have 7 tribal council men, women, voted on. We vote every 2 years, so we don't have 7 going out and 7 coming in. We stagger it. So,
sure, makes sense.
And so I started that in 2017. 2020, 21, I became the vice chair. And so, it's just, that's where we've been. That's where I've been headed. So, my dad served, my uncle served, my grandmother served, my cousins have served. And I just thought, I'm at a point in my life where I have enough time to go do that.
To do that. Yeah, nice.
And so really, really have enjoyed it. It's hard, because you're making big decisions about, it's the tribal family. Everybody's impacted. And so you have to have good people in the council, and we really, really do. We get along. We don't agree on everything, which is fine.
Sure, yeah.
But at the end of the day, when the vote's cast, everybody accepts the decision, and I think that's what makes up a good council, that we actually counsel together. And So yeah, I've been doing that sort of work for the tribe. And then I left my position at Reclamation in 2019, right before the pandemic, and became a full-time employee of the Northwestern Band of Shoshone Nation.
Yeah. And part of that then, looking at your bio, and I obviously shared that with everybody before we started the episode here, but you're also now the program manager for the Wuda Ogwa restoration project. And did I, please correct me if I mistakenly said that wrong.
No, Wuda Ogwa, yeah, you got
Okay,
it.
good. Okay, want
Yeah,
to make sure. So tell us a little bit about the history of that site, because one of the things that grabbed my attention when I was looking for, I was always scanning the horizon for stories to reach out to people and see if they'll come on the show, and there's a pretty, I think, ugly history associated with this site. So can you talk through that and let people know, what happened there, and now what you're doing there to build something more beautiful in this location?
Yeah, so right now it's called the Bear River Massacre site. I mean, that's just what people call it. They know it as.
Yeah.
Our ancestors would call it Moson Degani, meaning home of the lungs, because the hot springs were there, and and over those red types of lava rocks and the steam coming up, it looked like someone breathing, and so the home of the lungs, and that's where you knew where to go, because there's several hot springs in the area, but they all had a little bit different name, and so that's what they called it, and they would winter there because of those hot springs. The ground they would camp on was geothermal, and so their teepees were dry and heated from the ground up, and there were willows and cattails and grasses that were exposed so that you could have horses, and they camped in a box canyon. You go there today and you're like, why in the hell would you guys ever camp? Because there's no trees, there's no cover, there's no water. It's like, what? And it's like, you've got to put on your hat and go back in time and be like, well, this is what it would have looked like.
Yeah, wow.
And so, for thousands of years, they met there to do what is called the warm dance. It's a community dance. It's not just like a one-day thing. You show up for a couple weeks, and it's your rendezvous, it's your powwow, it's your respite. Other Shoshone bands would come in, and I call it gambling, gossip, and games, because that's what would basically happen. They loved sports races, horse races, and doing those sorts of things and handing out prizes. And so, I mean, you can imagine, hey, this was a lot of fun. You get to see people you haven't saw for a long time. A lot of times that's where you met your spouse.
Sure. Makes sense.
Just because you'd be traveling like that. And so, to me, I picture it as like, that's something I'd want to go to. That's something I'd want to hang out at. And so for thousands of years, they did that. So it was such a wonderful, special place to winter. Recently I went out with Dr. Brian Cotting, who's one of the heads of anthropology at the University of Utah. And he just was walking around and said, oh, hey, here's a projectile. And we picked it up and said, hey, take that back and study it. And see, and it's 4,000 years old. It's called Elko Chert. And, the people that say, oh, I don't think you were there that long. And it's like, well, we were really here at least 4,000.
At least, yeah.
At least on this very spot. And so that's kind of the history of that area. And then on January 29th, 1863, soldiers had marched from Fort Douglas a few days earlier with what we thought they were coming to capture some horse thieves. And so we were like, who did it? People, I did. All right, well, we're going to give you over to the army and they'll deal with you. And so in the morning of the 29th, super cold, the diaries I read from the soldiers is their whiskey was freezing in the barrel, just feet and feet of snow. And so the chiefs rode out to, they had told everybody the night before, there was a large group that left, because everybody knew what was coming. And then there was a group mostly of older men, women, and children that were like, it's going to be hard for them to travel. We'll just keep them here, and then we'll go negotiate with the army. The army came down the hill, and when they saw us, they just immediately started shooting. And so we knew the fight was on. they're turning around, yelling, "The soldiers are coming! The soldiers are coming!" And getting people out of teepees and waking people up and get out this way, get out this way.
Yeah.
And we had 121 men that could actually fight. There's 300 Army people.
Yeah.
There was probably 600 people there. So we had men from 15 to 45 is what we guessed. Not all of them had a gun. We did one volley. 14 soldiers were killed immediately. Sadly, 5 horses also perished. But they withdrew because they realized what we were doing. We were fighting on one side to get people to escape on the other. And they saw that, and so they changed their tactic. And so about at that point, we were out of bullets. And so there was only one more soldier that was killed during the battle.
Yeah.
And, there were several more that died from weather and hypothermia and gangrene in their limbs afterwards, but not very many from wounds, just because we didn't have the weapons.
Yeah.
And trying to protect old men, women, and children it was hard and just chaotic. And so we had people laying. My great grandfather laid on the ground and played dead.
Wow.
Several women would jump into the icy Bear River, but then float to where the hot springs were, and they'd be under the bank, and they could hear the soldiers up top. And one woman, her name was Anzachi, was holding her baby.
Jeez.
And just looked at the rest of the women, and the baby started to cry, so she just let it go.
Oh, it's so.
And, she didn't want that to she sacrificed that for the rest of the people that she
Yeah, that's awful. That is awful.
And so it was, it lasted about 3 or 4 hours, and, afterwards we're just all scattered. And that point on, from that very point on, we were really struggling and striving to be a people. But that's that area. That's what that area means. And because it's January and a lot of the places are frozen, and we got out of there really quickly and didn't come back. A lot of those bodies just laid there.
Yeah.
And they're still buried there.
Yeah.
There's always those local legends that say, "Oh yeah, those old people dug a big pit and shoved them in." And I was like, "When? March?" And, it was just, so it's a graveyard for us. It's a cemetery. And, was quick, within a decade was taken over for ag use, and all the tree, there were plenty of cottonwoods, all the streams, the creek. For a long time it was called the Battle of Bear River. And until the 1990s, my grandmother just really led the charge. It was a massacre.
It wasn't much of a
call that this
fight, right?
But finally, in the 90s, Congress was like, "Oh yeah, probably," and so through an act of Congress, we got the name changed. A lot of the locals up there that I still talk to, that I'm really good friends with, I'll say, "Yeah, the massacre." "Oh no, it was the Battle of Bear River." I was like, "Yeah, you're gold." Like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "I love that you just are so staunch on that." And
it was somewhere between 350 and 500 Shoshone were massacred in that battle.
So,
I mean, if that's
so we've been doing a lot of research and just calculating names, and there were 72 TP / wiki ups that were there. You sleep 7 to 8 for one of those.
Yeah.
And the numbers at the time, we guesstimated we had about 600, a little over 600. So our guesses have risen to about 450, between 450 and 500.
Yeah. Wow.
Were killed that day. There was I think he was a Danish doctor in the area, and we have his journal now, but he went through after and counted all the bodies, and he got to 498.
Wow.
Where the locals had said, "Well, we counted them, they're 368, they counted them twice." But the doctor said, "Oh, I got in the stream and went downstream and walked," and said, "This was my count." And so we were like, "Oh my gosh, we're right at 500.
Yeah. Wow.
So, and just 600, 625, 650 members at that time. We just had a death the other day, so we're back down to 579. So we haven't even made up.
Recovered, right?
We haven't recovered from that.
Yeah.
And still trying to. And that's what a lot of my thing is just like, hey, we're still here. We just need help recovering a little bit.
Yeah.
And but yeah, that's what happened to that spot.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's hard to hear, but thank you for sharing that. And yeah, growing up in Texas in the 80s, U.S. history, Texas history in middle school, and U.S. history in high school, you don't hear about things like that. So, learning some of these, bits and pieces of U.S. history that are pretty horrendous, it's good to know. We need to know those stories, and so thank you for sharing it. Thank you for being a repository of that tribal knowledge, and appreciate your willingness to tell us about it, because it's history that needs to be shared and told. So thank you. So at this, does the tribe now own that land again? Is because it sounds like it was lost after that and became ag land and privatized and over years. So the tribe has been able to regain that land. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it got Homestead Act. People came in and just took it over, and people would sell their lots. And at the end of the day, there was a large landowner that we had talked to previously throughout the years, and Mr. Johnson just, I don't want to sell. And then in 2018, he had come to the tribe, and or 2017, I'm ready to sell. And we just jumped back, and we have tribal businesses and things outside of the tribe that help generate, basically general fund money, and we had enough in there to buy half of but it was the half we wanted because it was on the north side of the river.
Yeah.
And that was the most culturally important. And our neighbor, Bozen Land and Livestock, joined us and said, well, we'll buy the other half so you guys can get this half. And so we went in and made that deal. And in 2018, we signed the deed. And so we own it outright. It's not it's not trust land. It's not a reservation. It's just our land.
Yeah.
And so we were able to purchase it and add a couple other parcels to it. And so, we have about 500 acres which right now that suits us just fine.
Yeah. And you mentioned reservation. My assumption is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but since the tribe was largely decimated in that 1863 massacre, I'm assuming you don't actually have a reservation land?
You're correct. Yeah, we don't.
Okay.
We're actually still trying to work with Congress and our senators here to make good on the promises for a reservation. In our first treaty we signed was in 1863, the Treaty of Box Elder, where they talked about it, but we were like, no, we're from here. And then in the Treaty of Fort Bridger, they set up Wind River, they set up Fort Hall, and we said, we're from neither of those places. We're from Cache Valley, Utah. And by then the Mormon pioneers had moved into that area, and they were like, oh, hell no, you're not moving.
Yeah.
You're not setting up a reservation here. It was hard enough to get you guys out.
Yeah.
So we just largely wandered around and didn't have a place.
Yeah.
We eventually ended up appealing to the Mormon leader Brigham Young, and he said, okay, let's go out here. And he found a spot, that was just kind of out of the way. And he said, you guys can have this, but it's going to be owned by us, and you're going to go to church, and you're going to be under ecclesiastical direction. And, at the time you're like, oh, okay, but you got to grow your own food. You still got to go hunting.
Yeah.
Set up a school. I mean, was it ideal? I don't know. It acted kind of like a reservation, but it absolutely wasn't. There was very little government assistance. I think the government was more than happy let's just let the Mormons handle them. That's less cost. That's less headache for us. Let's them deal with it.
Sure.
And at the time, we were probably more comfortable with that because we had been decimated by the army, and so we didn't want to see them again. And really weird unique relationship with the church, even to this day.
Yeah, sounds oddly similar to some of the indigenous history I am familiar with. Growing up in the San Antonio area and the San Antonio missions that are there, and the Spanish colonial activities of the 1700s of basically disbanding the indigenous tribes and populations, and kind of blending everybody into a mission Indian. You live within the confines of the mission, and you sacrifice your culture and your history and your beliefs to become Catholic. And you can kind of stay on the land, but you gotta now be kind of a subservient to the Catholic Church and the Spanish colonial crown. So it's very similar sounding history, just with the Mormon Church instead of the Catholic Church. So wow. Well, so best wishes and good luck on getting the reservation. I know it sounds like an ongoing fight, so I wish you well with that. And
appreciate that.
Yeah. So tell us, I guess, about the restoration. Then you said upwards of 500 acres. Was that what I heard?
Yeah.
So what's the plan now here? What are you in the process of doing, and what's the vision that you're working towards?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I took this on, there was an engineer that I had worked with at Reclamation. I just said, hey, if I ever go out on my own, I'm calling you and your firm.
Yeah.
Gave the guy a phone call. He's like, I know 2 biologists. And so one day, basically 3 acquaintances meet, and they're standing on the hill discussing, well, what do we do? Like, we have no money. We don't know where we're going to get any money, but the tribal council wants to do a restoration. And, we sat up there for a couple hours just talking about things and said, well, let's start with a phase of removing Russian olive trees. And then we'll replant after that. And then from there, it just really grew because people started to take notice of what we were doing. And so the funding started to come in a lot faster than we expected. And so we had to make plans a little bit quicker. And so the overall goal is to, remove all the invasive species, replant about 250,000 native plants from that area. A lot of them are medicine plants. A lot of them are food plants, cottonwood trees, juniper, quake and aspen, just really good habitat for birds and for deer.
Yeah, so I mean grasses and this the whole variety of
grasses,
of
willows, cattails. We need to recreate the wetlands that was there.
Yeah, nice.
And back in 1863, the tribe camped around what was called Beaver Creek.
Okay.
And this was a creek that came through the mountain that they were camped by and entered into the Bear River downstream about 3/4 of a mile. And fresh water, cold, a lot of beaver. Peter Skeen Ogden, who's a famous fur trapper in these parts, Ogden, Utah is named after him. Actually in his diary, kind of like, well, here's where we are, and I'm camped with the Shoshone. We're like, oh my gosh, he's right on the spot.
Yeah.
And they talked about how the beaver dams made for bigger fish, the water pulls up. And
sure.
So just kind of a great place. And we're like, can we really achieve that? Like, is that something we could actually do? Like,
get
move
back
this
to,
over here?
Yeah.
Take this channelized irrigation system, which, by the way, is the most turbid or dirty water in the entire Bear River watershed. So throughout 3 states and millions of acres, we have the dirtiest water. And so we're the last user on the line.
Yeah, you're towards the end there, yeah.
So, okay, how do we clean this up? And so we just put together a plan of, all right, we don't need that irrigation ditch anymore. Let's let the water free flow over the land. We'll do our plantings around where we're going to have that water free flow. And we're going to replant. Every time we remove Russian olive, we'll replant right over it. And so the goal is to make it look as much as possible like it could have in 1863.
Yeah.
So if you were from 1863, you might recognize, some of the area. And, people started to ask us, well, did you guys do this for the Great Salt Lake? I said, well, we did it because it's our cultural and spiritual belief of the land, and the byproduct of that is, you people downstream in the Great Salt Lake are going to have an advantage, for that, and we recognize that. But we didn't do it. We didn't do it for you. We did it for us. But we will help you. We will help you have this help benefit, what your needs are, because it's about community for the tribe.
Yeah.
So.
From a geography perspective, so people understand where you're working on, this Bear River area is a bit north. If I'm got the map in my head right, that is draining into the Great Salt Lake.
Yeah, so it's about 65 miles, where from our point to where the basically just straight south.
Yeah.
Into the Great Salt Lake, and the Bear River is the largest contributor to the Great Salt Lake. I mean, that's where it gets most of its water, and so. Very concerned about that. And so, we've started to make that part of a priority, because that's our Aboriginal territory as well. I mean,
sure, of course.
Our home.
Yeah.
And we don't want to see that lake go.
Yeah, so, it's dwindling. If people don't know that, it's drying up. So yeah. And
so we were like, and so we've really gotten involved in the community, and by that, the community's gotten really involved in us.
Yeah, great.
So we have people come and help plant, we have people donate, we have people that volunteer work, and all to just make a place beautiful and climate adaptive and better water, more water, because we won't be losing as much throughout flooding, irrigation, and doing those sorts of things, and animals and birds and fish and everything coming back to the area is a huge goal of ours. And so we just really want it to make it a place that's sacred. I mean, it's already sacred, but we want that reverence there.
Yeah.
Where you show up and you're like, oh, this is a place.
Yeah.
And, we'll grow our own medicine plants and things we use for ceremony, our own food plants. We're going to have our own little nursery there where we teach kids, where the elders teach kids, this is how you use this plant for,
nice.
Cuts and abrasions, or this is how you use eye wash, and this is how you make this, and just really try to make it cultural enough to where we can go there and have teaching moments, and that our kids will grow up doing that. And so Beaver Creek was renamed Battle Creek. I don't know. People keep asking me, are you guys going to change it back? I'm like, I don't think we get to decide the name of that river, but hopefully, because beavers, another thing would be bringing back.
Yeah, it'd be nice if it could go back, right?
Yeah, so we'll be doing all those things, and so it's just a full restoration of the land, where if you saw it in 2018 and you came now, you'd be like, oh, not recognizable, and hopefully by 2035, you're like, this place is completely different.
That's exciting that you're already that far along. Because restoration projects, as from personal experience, I know take decades to get done. Not only just the restoration part, but then take decades beyond that for the full grow out of everything you're planning. So this is a multi-decade process that you're in the early stages on, and to hear that you're already that far along is really positive, and that's really exciting. And I understand, in addition to the teaching at the nursery, that I see somewhere that there's plans for a interpretive center or cultural center as well, or
we would really like that. It's hard to find government funding for a building like that or that size, but we're constantly trying to raise money.
That's
and
the
people
ambition,
can donate. It's fully we've done mostly the hard work getting it designed and getting all the permits and having all of those things, so it's shovel ready to be built. It's just when the pandemic hit and concrete and steel and wood all went up in price, we gotta wait. So we're planning that, because we want to plan a center where you can come and learn not only about the Bear River Massacre, but more about the tribe. because
Yeah.
The Bear River Massacre doesn't define us. It's a point in history.
Perfect.
But learn about what we did before and learn about what we did after. And, we talked to the locals and we're like, hey, we know you guys arrived here early and you took over. Like, we want this to be an evolving or revolving museum. We don't want you to come once and have seen everything. Like, we want to invite you to come and present your pioneer history here at our center. And just kind of give the community a chance to feel like, yeah, this is ours too.
A true historical cultural center that honors the indigenous history, but the more modern history as well, is what I'm hearing you say. Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah.
And so, just be a good way for people to come and just see, like, since we don't have reservation, all our people are scattered. And so you usually go to, like, at the reservation, you have these buildings these office buildings that just have tons and tons of artifacts. Our artifacts are with our people.
Yeah.
And so it'd be a good chance to have people donate, and then they can explain what it is, how their grandfather, and just want to make it really personal. And so just people can show up and see, oh, okay, that's what that is. And, learn a little bit more about us other than the massacre.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And that's, I know you're going to get there. One step at a time, one bit of funding at a time. But that sounds like it's a vision that needs to happen. So is there anything else? I know I want to be respectful of your time and day and everything as well. But is there something that we've missed about the project or about the tribe that I haven't asked you about, or that's something that you want to make sure people understand or know about the work that you're doing or the tribe in general?
The tribe in general, really, we're a smaller tribe. We're spread out. It's hard to bring people together. So the project site is meant to do that. To start getting our 500 and something members to start coming together, since we're so spread out in the Wasatch Front and different places. And so, we're part of the community, and just kind of be cognizant and respectful of that.
Yeah.
That, hey, these guys are our community members, and really trying hard to sustain ourselves so we can build a building like that and teach. And so that's what we really want to do, is help teach people about who we are, that we're still here, and this is our story, our true story. It may not be what you read in the book, but so that's all I'd like to say.
Wonderful. Well, I'm in the Seattle area. I'd love to get down there someday and see the project firsthand. Yeah, it sounds like a wonderful project you're working on, and this whole idea of this show, is people like you telling your stories to inspire people to action and to. Oh, there's your cat. We talked offline that he might make an appearance. Yeah. But this idea of what I can envision in the future, the story I'm telling myself after learning more about what you're doing there, is that this 500 acres, when it reaches its full restoration potential, is really going to be an example for others along the Bear River, up and down the Bear River, to see this is what can be done.
Yeah.
This is look what they did, and we can do restoration work along our stretch of the river as well. So because that's how this stuff works. Somebody does it, against all odds, you get it done, and you can inspire others to go, wow, look at that. Look at what we can have if we come together and live more sustainably and restore the world around us. So I see it being a great example there in Utah and throughout the Bear River Basin. So
appreciate that. Yeah, and I just got to give credit to our neighbors. All the different organizations, the Bear River Commission, the state of Utah, the Great Salt Lake City Advisory Council. All of these people have, they're like, hey, you need to be on our board. I'm like, okay. Because they do ask those questions. How did you do this? What are you doing? What's going on? Can we model this? And and to us, it's so important for us to help other people. You know, it's like, hey, you may have a little bit different land or different thing from us, but here's an idea that what we did. Here's how we went after funding. Here's how we did it. And so we really feel fortunate that we can, and we make sure we take the opportunity to meet with those agencies, to meet with other irrigation companies, and, you know, offer support and offer help, uh, and in turn they come back and volunteer for us and do certain things. And so it's just like you said, symbiotic. Like every if everybody did something on their 20 or 30 acres, that adds up.
That collaboration and that, you know, one inspires the other, and helping each other along with lessons learned and best practices and all that. That's how it's going to get done. So I appreciate you, your whole career, from the BLM days to what you're doing now with the tribe and trying to make the world a better place. So thank you for all that you've done.
I appreciate it. Love doing it.
Yeah. So tell us, the audience, whether they're listening or watching, tell us what you want us to do. What's your call to action now that hopefully everybody's, you know, amped up and inspired, and they want to go do something to either support you and the tribe, they're in Utah, or they want to get involved in their own local community and you know, do something. You know, what's your call to action for people to do now that they've heard your story?
Yeah, so my first, you know, when people ask, hey, I'm not around there or whatever, what little can I do? And it's learn about where you're from. First of all, like, learn about what's in the area. Are these things, take an inventory of what you have. Are these things native, non-native? And if you find something that you can remove and replant with a native tree, you know, there are programs that help you do that. And that's something everybody can try and do. And, you know, more trees, better climate, you know, better use of water. Like, don't just waste your water. You know, when you live through droughts, you're just like, you don't realize how close you actually are sometimes to losing that. So really respect the water and the land. For those that want to, like, help with our project, we have volunteer days throughout the year to, like, clean up, plant trees, pull weeds and things like that. And so we invite people to come out to do that. We try to put together a volunteer list where we can send out emails to everybody. And the other thing is if you really wanted to donate a tree to us, you're able to do that through our website. You know, just click donate a tree, and we GPS it for you, take a picture of it. And so hopefully if you're, like I said, if you're living in Seattle and you buy a tree that we plant and we GPS it, one day you can go there and be like, that's my tree.
Yeah, right on.
And all the volunteers, we encourage them to GPS the trees that they plant, because we said, we want you to come back with your grandkids and say that this section was me, or that was me. And so just to kind of make it home to them, and that's what I ask people to do, is like make your home, you know, like that. Like, get invested in it, and then you'll want to take better care of it. So but that's things that we could do.
Well, what's the? I'll put this on the show notes as well for afterwards. But what's the website?
Your voice,
am I still here? Am I back? I can hear you, Brad.
It's me.
Yeah, I can.
Oh, there
hear
you go.
Yeah. Okay. All right, we're back. What's the website where people can go and donate? I'll make sure to put it on the show notes so that people can link to it. But tell us what it is, so, you know, people can go and contribute. And I'm assuming you'll take other donations if somebody just wants to,
yes,
you know, give some funds to help support the project. Yep. So where do people go to do that?
So you go to NWB Shoshone SHOSHONE.com. It's under construction right now. We're moving some things around, so keep trying if it doesn't work. The other thing that people can do to get on the list and to get more information about the donate site is to email Maria Monker at mmonker, MMONCUR at nwbshoshone.com. You know,
great. So, I'll make sure all that's in the show notes. And that's the Maria that helped
That's Maria that helped you.
Hi, Maria.
Yeah. So, Maria,
thank you, Maria, for getting this interview set up.
Yeah, watch your email box. So.
Yeah. Let's hope we get some responses from this. But wonderful. Well, Brad, I end every episode talking about hope. We talk sometimes during these conversations about some hard things, and certainly the discussion around the massacre is a very difficult conversation to hear, and the land degradation and the trouble we're having with climate change and the Colorado River and everything we talk about. We talk about some hard things and some problems and some challenges we're facing. So in addition to all the inspiring work you're doing with the restoration project, I always want to leave people with some hope. So I ask my guests the same 3 questions about hope. And hope isn't a pink cloud emotion. Hope is actually for those who study it, it has meaning in our lives. It what gives us the motivation to go take action. So hope is this idea that you have a vision for a better future. You have some idea of the steps you can take towards that vision, and you have a sense of agency that there's something you can do to affect that outcome. You might not get there. It might not be easy. You might not be able to do it alone. In fact, most times you can't do it alone. We need each other in this world. But that's kind of the hallmark of hope. And when you have hope, then you have that ability to go take action and face the hard challenges of the world. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions about hope. Just kind of give me your first gut intuition, your first answer from your heart. Don't think too much about it, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So the first question about hope, Brad, is what's your vision for a better future? It can be for you personally, you professionally, or the world. What's your hope for a better future?
Working better into community. We're a little divided on issues and things right now. Even regarding climate, but that the sense of community comes back. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for. I don't have any kids, but my nieces and nephews and their kids, and I want them to be able to reach out into their community, teach this story, and bring other people into it. And just be more community minded. Like, yeah, you may hate it, but it may be the best thing for your 90-year-old neighbor. And, basically getting back to, hey, I've got a widow across the street. I should go take out her garbage. Just that sort of mentality is what I have hope for. And this younger generation, I see it. And so, they're really a lot, really motivated to be involved in community. And so, that's very hopeful.
Tell me why that's important. Why should we be back involved in community where we're caring for each other like that?
If you love your neighbor, you won't ignore them, you won't steal from them, you won't try to do anything bad, and then you realize that you're part of a community and they will help you also, and your goals together, 5 fingers don't make a fist until you close them and you work together. And that's really what it is just you have more people in your circle to make better changes, more ideas. You're not alone, you don't need to be anxious and depressed. You have people. And so, and just meeting people, older people, younger people, everybody can teach you. And so it's good to be in that sort of environment and community.
Perfect. So last question, imagine now that future you just described, where everybody's more engaged in community, more open, more empathetic, more willing to help their neighbor and be helped by their neighbor. That's the world we're living in right now, your future. How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel great. I truly think that the great creator watches those things, and that some of the turmoil that we're experiencing is just bad energy that we're putting into the environment. We've beat up on Mother Earth, and she's done with it, and so she's going to show us, hey, all right, you want to do this? Then this we'll have a drought, we'll have this, we'll have that, we'll have this. In no way like some punishment from God, but I just think it's, we believe in the great spirit and the great creator, in all things, and it's like if you act harmoniously, that spirit within the earth and water and things recognizes that, and it begins to help you back. And I think about that, and I think of all the advantages that could be in the future. We don't see the level of wildfires that we saw in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
We don't have to fight over water here and worry about toxic dust and stuff flying around. We can just have our kids. To me, I would be grateful if I could just sit back in my chair on my porch and watch kids just play in the street, go from house to house like we did when we were kids, and not worried about something happening, because you don't know anybody in your community anymore, but back then you did.
Yeah.
And it was so much fun, to interact with everybody. Everybody was your parent, and that's how I would feel. I just feel really grateful, because I just think you would see so many positive changes.
Love it. Well, Brad, thank you for sharing the work that you do with us. Thank you for sharing your vision for a better future. That's a future I believe in, and going to do my little piece to try and help us get there. So thank you for that. So
appreciate it.
And appreciate your time. Again, Maria's help setting this up, but thank you for all your leadership and all the work that you're doing there in Utah. It's making a difference. So thank you very much for what you do. And I will let you know if I can ever get down there, because I'd love to see it.
Yeah, give me a call. We'll take you right out.
All right. Well, I'll let you get back to work, and I appreciate your time. Thanks, Brad.
Thanks, Stephen. Have a good day.
Take care.
Good weekend. Bye-bye.
What an incredible conversation with Brad Parry. From his early work in water management to his leadership in restoring the Bear River Massacre site, Brad's journey is a testament to the power of environmental restoration and cultural preservation. We learned about the importance of removing invasive species to conserve water, the collaborative efforts needed to protect natural resources, and how the Shoshone Tribe is reclaiming their ancestral lands to ensure their history is never forgotten. Brad's work reminds us that understanding our past, especially the painful parts, is essential if we want to create a better future. As Socrates famously said, the unexamined life is not worth living. Look, if we fail to acknowledge and learn from our history, be it our own personal history or that of our nation's history, we can't correct past mistakes or find ways to right the wrongs of the past. Brad and the Shoshone people are doing just that. They're honoring their ancestors, restoring the land, and ensuring that future generations remember the truth of what happened at Bear River. And in addition to doing all of this, their ecosystem restoration efforts will also carry benefits all the way to the Great Salt Lake, and hopefully inspire others to restore habitat and ecosystems throughout Utah and the American West. So, I want to thank Brad for sharing his story with us today and the story of the Shoshone Nation. I also want to thank Brad for his leadership and dedication to making the Bear River a better place for his tribe and for the residents of Utah. By doing so, he is helping to make the world a better place. For those of you listening or watching, I hope you feel inspired to take action in your own community. You can support the Shoshone's restoration efforts, get involved in local conservation projects, learn about Indigenous history in your own area, or even just take the time to educate others about the stories that too often go untold. Every effort counts. And if you enjoyed this episode and it resonated with you, please share it with your family and friends. Like and follow Stories Sustain Us, leave me a comment, and help spread the word about these important stories far and wide. Your support really makes a huge difference, so thank you. I also want to invite you back for next week's episode coming out on March 25th. I'll be talking with an incredible guest about the global transition to clean energy. I was truly inspired by her unwavering confidence that this transition can't be stopped. And I think you'll be inspired by her too. So don't miss it. Catch the next episode of Stories Sustain Us on March 25th at storiessustainus.com, wherever you listen to podcasts, and on YouTube. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being a part of this journey to make the world a better place. Until next time, I'm Stephen Shower. Take care of yourself and each other. Take care.